Hello everyone, it's Nelty Campy and I'm getting ready to judge the senior showmanship here. This is our pattern. It's starting on the left side of cone A, jog around cone B, stop, do a 180, back up, another 180, walk to the judge, set up, inspection. When they're finished, 270, and then trot away. So a fair degree of difficulty. There's not a ton of rotation in these turns, but it is difficult to do multiple turns with a backup and get everything lined up with the judge. So I thought it'd be a good pattern for the seniors. We had 13 exhibitors in this class, and I think what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to start from the lower placings and then build up from there. And I went ahead and scored them all out on my score sheet. So I'm going to give you my maneuver scores and my penalties and then kind of explain my line of thinking as we go through, because I think that gives you the most feedback and then how you can improve from there. So we are starting out with, looks like Brittany. I'm going to do full screen here since her video is a little bit smaller. Okay, so Brittany steps off, has to help her horse a lot to get started. So she gets out of position slightly. It's a little trouble in the turn, and then the horse breaks to the walk early. So I did a -2 for my maneuver score, and these maneuver scores are on a scale of +3 to -3. In the pivot here, you can tell the horse is just learning showmanship, so she does have to help it quite a bit. Moves the hind end significantly for a penalty 5, and then I had to do a -2 maneuver score. The backup, again, you can tell this is a newer horse at showmanship, and she's doing a great job helping her through the pattern, but she did have to help her a lot. So a -2 for the maneuver score. Hind end moves significantly in the pivot again for a penalty 5 and a -2 there. I like the walk though. She walks up here, marches up here, horse has a good expression, fairly straight. I did a 0 for that, which is average. Now here we're missing the setup and the inspection. So Brittany, normally you'd want to set your horse up in a square, and then we do an inspection where somebody walks around you. So without that part, I do have to call this off pattern. The 270, the hind end does move again, so we want to work on those pivots. And then trotting off, the horse trots off pretty willingly at the end here. I would 0 that trot off at the end. Then on your score sheet, we've got an overall form and effectiveness, which is kind of your presentation and how you show your horse through the pattern. That's on a scale of 1 to 5. I did a 2 there, and your horse does bring that score down a little bit. But overall, I mean, I love seeing a horse out there showing and an exhibitor going through the pattern. If we all waited till everything was perfect, then we'd never show. So great job, keep up the good work, really focus on those pivots, and I think you'll be up to speed in no time. Okay, moving up from there, here we've got Summer. Summer showed 2 horses today. This one is Summer showing Royal. And I think I can do full screen here. And hopefully it won't be in the way too much. Let me try to make myself smaller. Okay. So Summer steps off here, takes a stride at the walk in going into the trot, but still a decent trot. I just did a 0 maneuver score on that. You can tell this horse is newer at showmanship too, so moves the hind end significantly for a penalty 5 and a -2 maneuver score. Backs up very correct here though. I like the backup. Gave that a 0. It's average. It was correct. For our second 180, moves the hind end significantly again for a penalty 5 and a -2 maneuver score. Good walk. I like her confidence. She walks right up here. She's straight, so that's a 0. That's correct. For the setup here, I'd like to see the horse a little bit more square. I don't get a great view of the legs here, but I can tell that the hind legs are staggered. So I did a -1 for the maneuver score. And I break out my setup and my inspection. Inspection is good. Because the horse isn't square, I'm not probably going to go above a 0 on the inspection. Probably even could have done +0.5 on that, though, to be honest. Here, we want to work on those pivots, moves the hind end significantly for a penalty 5 and a -2 maneuver score. I'd like to see this horse step right off. It walks 2 or 3 strides before it trots off. So I did do a -1 on the maneuver score for that one. But F&E, I did a 3, so average. I think this is a newer horse that's learning showmanship, and hey, you gotta start somewhere showing it. I was glad the horse showed. Summer, I thought you did a great job taking a horse through a pattern that's doesn't really know that much showmanship. Your overall score, because of those penalties, dropped you down to a 50. And then I had to minus the maneuver scores to go along with those penalties. But I think your horse is in good condition. I mean, it's shiny, it's presented well to show. So I just do your homework on those pivots, and I see a lot of potential in this horse. Okay, now we've got Summer's other horse. So I'm going to call this one Whiskey. Let's get to the beginning of Whiskey. Okay. Steps off here, walks a couple strides, so I did -0.5 on the maneuver score. Comes around the cone pretty well. Now this horse does pivot a little bit better than the other horse, but still right there slides that pivot foot. So I had to do a penalty 3 and a -1.5 on the maneuver score. The backup gets kind of crooked. The horse steps sideways through the back, so -2 on the maneuver score. Here we have the same type of pivot, getting through it better than your first horse, but I still did penalty 3, -1.5 on the maneuver score. Walks up good though, 0. The setup, I don't get a really good view at the legs and the feet, but it's not completely square. Front end looks more square than the hind end, so I did a -1 on the setup for the maneuver score. Your inspection, though, as far as your part, is very correct, so that's a 0. And then we go into our 270 here. Moves the hind end significantly, but it's a lot of turn for a horse that's just learning. Penalty 5 for moving the hind end significantly with a -2 for the maneuver score. And this horse does step off a little bit late going into the last trot, so that's a -1 for the maneuver score. The F&E is a 3 again. So here's a horse slightly more advanced in showmanship than her first horse. So my end score was a 53 on this, and mostly just because of the penalties on the pivots and that I had to drop the maneuver score. But again, you know, Summer, you're doing a great job presenting these horses, and I think if you keep it up, they're gonna climb up into those scores really quickly. Okay, from there, let's see here. This is, I believe this is Sabrina. Let's get to the beginning. So I want to make sure, yep. Okay, I think this one's close enough. We can do this one just like this. Horse just walks like a stride before stepping off. Fairly good communication here though in the trot, so I left that as a 0. Our 180 is correct. The horse pivots on the left hind foot. So it was moving a pivot foot, but it was moving the right hind. It did hold that left hind throughout the pivot. I would prefer seeing the horse pivot on the right hind, but it's still correct. So I left it at a 0. Horse backs a bit, crooked, kind of wishy-washy back and forth, but Sabrina, you do a great job making those corrections. Still a -1 for the maneuver score. Okay, here we do slide the pivot foot in that first step. So a penalty 3, -1 for the maneuver score. The walk, kind of the horse gets in your space, maybe comes up a little crooked. So I had the -1/2 there. In the setup, I would have liked to see you take a bit more time, maybe another step and square up those front feet and maybe the hind feet a little bit more. So I had to do a -1 in the setup for your maneuver score. It's okay to take some time with that. You've paid to show, and if your horse needs an extra second or so to really get set up correctly, I would take your time to do that. Then we continue on to the inspection. Now in the inspection, Sabrina, when you cross over, you almost step back each time you cross over. So it's not the smoothest crossover like that. I think you're a really good showman. I would like to see you kind of step across your horse forward with some forward motion. But I mean, I like your posture, your presentation, your confidence is all good. So maybe that last little part where you step back, I'd step forward. So I'm -1/2 on the inspection, but really easy thing to change, and that's just my preference. Here we have a correct pivot. It is on the left hind, so I did a 0. Takes a few steps to step off in the trot, so I did a -1/2 for the maneuver score there. Your F&E was a 3. We have that penalty from sliding the foot in the pivot, so that does drop you down. Your overall score was a 65.5, but I mean, minor little mistakes and stuff where I had to drop the maneuver score down that would be very easy to fix. So overall, you know, not that far off here. Okay, now we are to select Nicky. Found you. Okay. I'm gonna make this bigger. So we step off here, get a little out of position, maybe a tad in front of your horse coming around this turn. We don't have cones, and that's okay. You do the pattern, but I did -1/2 that maneuver score for being slightly out of position. Here, that was a 0. Horse is correct. Pivots on the left hind. I'd prefer to see it on the right hind for a higher score. Back maybe gets a little crooked. I did a -1/2 on that. I'd probably be like -1/2 to a 0. Here, another correct pivot. Again, it's on the left hind, so there's no penalty for that. It's just sometimes not as smooth. 0 maneuver score, 0 for the walk. Walked right up there, that was correct. Now in the setup, it takes a minute here, and if I remember right, I don't think we don't get the front feet squared up. So I did a -1 in the maneuver. Take the time to, if it needs to take an extra move or two and move those front feet up, and then I could have done an easy 0 on it, maybe even a little higher than that. The inspection was correct. I did a 0. Maybe a little more confidence from you, and I could easily bump that 0 up into the plus category. Now we're on to the 270. And here we do take that step with the left hind foot, and I know that's your pivot foot. So penalty 3 for that, -1 on the maneuver score, 0 for the trot off. It's correct. Let's get back here. So I did a 3 on the F and E. With that, penalty for the 270 and a couple slight deductions in the maneuver score. Your overall score was a 66, so we're not doing bad. Easy things to clean up a little bit, little more practice and communication, and we'll be able to raise that score really easy. All right. Now I'm moving to Christina. Okay, make this bigger too. I think it's just easy for everybody to see. Does take like half a walk step here, but I like the communication in the trot. I like how soft and easy that horse guided around the cone. I did +1 that trot. Here, so we move both pivot foots. We slide the right one to start with, and doesn't really establish a pivot foot. So I did a penalty 3 for that, -1 for the maneuver score. Backup is correct. That was a 0. Little hesitation in that turn, but still correct. And the pivot foot never moved, so 0. I like the walk, straight. Maybe varies a little bit at the end, but I did +1 that walk. So as we're raising up the ladder here on our scores, this was a +1 setup. So I think that was the first one that I've had so far in this class. The hind feet are maybe just a hair staggered, but still a plus to me, and got there relatively quickly. And I did a +1/2 on the inspection. If the horse wasn't playing with its head and maybe wasn't as distracted, I could have gone a little bit higher, because this is a good exhibitor, has confidence in her position and the inspection. Here in the 270, we have some trouble. So we moved the hind end significantly for a penalty 5 and a -2 on the maneuver score. Like trots right off though. So I +1 on that. I did 3 on the F and E. If you could get your pivots corrected and streamlined, that would easily rise up, because you are a good exhibitor. But we had a lot of penalties. We had 8 points of penalties, and then I had to drop the maneuver score. So our overall score was a 66.5. Little things keeping you out of the placings there. So just small corrections and you'll definitely be up here. Okay. Moving up, we have Ashley. Find her on the score sheet. Okay. Ashley steps off. Good communication here. Nice even trot. Comes around the cone nicely. It was a +1. Had you stepped off a little more promptly into the trot, I could have easily gone higher on that. And there, right there, we slide the pivot foot. So it was a penalty 3 with a -1 maneuver score. Kind of like the backup though. I can tell you've got to help your horse a little bit, but you do that well and it ends up straight. I +1/2 on the back. Okay, I'm going to rewind that pivot just a little bit, because I have a penalty 3 here and I just want to make sure that I saw that correctly. There we go. So that sliding of the pivot foot, penalty 3, very minor, but it happens, and -1 on the maneuver score. Walk is straight. Horse cocks its head a little bit. I did a 0. It was a correct walk. Setup, you have the makings of a good setup, and then you kind of didn't finish it. So the horse gets a little stretch and his front feet aren't quite square. I do like how you're moving around the horse. I did a -1 for the setup. Little improvement needed on that, but I like your inspection. I did a +1/2 on that. On the pivot, we end up moving the hind end significantly. For a penalty 5, I had to -2 the maneuver score. Trots off well though. That was a 0. That part was correct. So the penalties get you on your pivots. Without the penalties, you're definitely above average, and you are an above average exhibitor. So we just need to do some training on those pivots to avoid the penalties and the negative maneuver scores. Your overall score was a 69, and that was with 11 points of penalties. So you were still almost an average score with those penalties. You've got a super nice horse. Just try to stay out of the penalty box, and you're going to end up at the top of the class pretty quickly. Okay, so now we get into the placings. And a lot of these were very close too. The margins were small. So there wasn't a ton that separated them. We were very close. Okay, so now we go to Allie. Allie is my 6th place horse. And let's run through this from the beginning. Steps off into the jog. It's correct. That's a 0 for me. Kind of going coneless here. I'm gonna let that fly. So one thing that Allie does really well is she stops pretty straight here. Now she doesn't have the cones to, it could be a plus or a minus not having the cones, because I can't really see your accuracy to them, but you do have to just kind of know where you are. So that was a 0 for the jog. .180's correct, and very correct. I did a +1 on the 180. I liked how she finished it nice and straight. Backup is correct. It's a 0. With more speed, I could definitely, I could add more. So going back to this pivot, right there, she kind of slides and steps with that pivot foot. So I had to do a penalty 3, -1/2 maneuver score. 0 for the walk, it's correct. And then we get to the setup here. And the setup, I like that you're taking your time getting your horse set up, but I would go ahead and make sure that you finish it. If you take the time, and I know sometimes it just feels like you're standing there forever, but you want your horse to be more square than this. So what I had to do is I had to do a -1.5 for the setup. And boy, I like your horse. I like how you show it. But because you didn't complete that setup really, your inspection for me, that was a 0. I'd like to see an inspection around a horse that's square. Then in your 270 here, I thought your horse might step out of this, but doesn't. At the end, I'm just going to give that kind of, that last step to you that maybe it took and slid it. Maybe that was just it's getting its balance to go up into the trot. I did not penalize it there, but I couldn't go higher than a 0. And just a 0 for the trot off. Your F and E, I did a 3.5. If you took the time to square your horse up, I think that could easily be a 4. And your overall score ended up with a 69.5. And that was with the 3-point penalty. And I had to minus that maneuver score and hit you kind of hard on the setup. So it would be easy for you to just get up into the 70s without that one mistake on the pivot and with a better setup. But still, it's a fairly big class, and you ended up 6th in this class with minor mistakes, so still good. Okay, now we are going to Chelsea. Switch my score sheet. Okay. So Chelsea trots off. Okay to start with, but the horse gets pushy around that cone and doesn't come to a really soft halt there. So I did -1 your trot. I'm keeping in mind there's a 50-mile-an-hour wind there, Chelsea. 0'd the pivot, it was correct. And I like the backup here. So I did +1/2 on the backup. Another correct pivot, but you do have to help your horse some, so I just did a 0. Minus half the walk, a little pushy in its face. Boy, it's windy. I'd be freezing to death if I was judging this in real life, Chelsea. The setup's taken a while here. And I'm not going to kill somebody for taking the time to get the horse really square. This is an exhibitor that knows what square is, and you can tell because she waited to get it. So even though it took a while, I still zeroed that. I'd go a little higher if the front feet were more square, but I like that you took the time to do the best you could on that square up on a horse that maybe is not so sure where its feet are. I did a 1.5 on the inspection here. This is a good showman with a lot of confidence stepping around your horse. I liked it. Pivot, we slide that pivot foot. You're doing a great job helping your horse through this and keeping them balanced. I did have to penalty 3 on that pivot for moving the foot, -1 the maneuver score. The horse trots right off though. I did +1 there. And I did a 4 for the F and E because this is a good exhibitor with a horse that needs a little bit more practice, but I liked how you showed them. You ended up with a 71.5, so slightly above average, and that's even with the penalties and the minor deductions. Good job showing this horse, and I know conditions were not ideal for it, so I appreciate you getting out there and getting it done. Okay, we are to Amanda. And Amanda was my 4th place horse. Somewhere warm where the grass grows, that's for sure. Amanda. All right, here we go. Steps right off here, good communication. Comes around the cone nicely. And one thing that Amanda does well is she doesn't cut that cone really, really close. So she gives herself an opportunity to make just a nice, easy curve and end up straight after that trot. I +1 that trot. And I haven't been able to do that a lot so far in this class. But Amanda here has a plan. I can tell by the way she shows. +1 on the pivot is correct. Had a little speed to it. Very, very correct on the backup. +1, steady rhythm. More speed would lead to a higher score, more degree of difficulty, but this is just a smooth, consistent pattern all the way through so far. +1 on that pivot. Walks up straight, +1 the walk. I like that she completes it, her halt, before turning to set her horse up. Pretty good setup. I +2 that. She looks very square and I think moved 1 foot to get there. I also +2 this inspection. The exhibitor has a lot of confidence, knows where she is moving around the horse. For our 270, right there, the horse gets startled and moves the pivot foot. And even though it was a distraction, I still have to give a penalty for that, which killed me because I love the flow of the run, but I did have to be fair. Penalty 3, -1 that maneuver score. I can understand the distraction though. Trots right off, great timing there. Horse is very responsive, so I +1 that trot. I gave the exhibitor an easy 4 on the F and E. So even with a 3-point penalty and I had to -1 that maneuver score, we were still at an 80. So still a good run, and without those penalties and maneuver score, we would have been mid-80s easy. And you know, there wasn't a ton of speed and degree of difficulty, but just clean, correct showmanship got her up there. Okay, we're moving up here. My 3rd place horse is Bailey. Let me find you. Found you. And as we get closer to the top here, like there was only maybe a point difference, 1.5 difference between my placings. So that's very close. Let's get to the beginning. I lied. That's Stacie. Let me find Bailey here. Jennifer. Okay, I got a little out of order there. Let me reorder this. Okay, so Bailey I have as my third place horse. Getting back to it. Okay. I like that. Steps right off, good rhythm. Like how she comes around the cone. Again, she leaves a little bit of space here between the cone and her, and that's okay. You can show this pattern to the best of your ability. You get to pick where the judge and the camera is standing. I think that was a smart strategy. +2 on that trot. Right there. The horse steps out of the pivot. So I had to penalty 3. I just zeroed that maneuver score. And usually I -1 the maneuver score with that penalty, but because you're a good showman, Bailey, I felt like a 0 there. Good backup, very straight, steady rhythm, +1.5. Here's the pivot without stepping off, easy, +1.5, +1 the walk. Straight, had some confidence. This horse looks pretty square to me. Might be slightly staggered, the front feet. And I wish I could see the feet more, because what I did is I did a +1 on the setup, and I think I probably could have gone higher if I could have seen your horse's feet. I did +2 on the inspection. I like this exhibitor's confidence, her posture. She looks very sure of herself moving around her horse, so I +2 that. I did a +1.5 on this pivot. I did a 0 on the trot off since the horse kind of turns its head a little bit. Otherwise, that could have been a plus maneuver. I did a 4 on the F and E for this exhibitor. So even with the 3-point penalty for the pivot, we're still at an 81.5. So a good score, definitely above average. Very third and fourth place. We're very close here. The split would have been small for those 2 horses. Okay, creeping up to my second. Now we have Stacie. Steps off. Pretty good rhythm here. I liked that complete halt, +1.5 for the trot. Good pivot with a little bit of speed, +1.5. The back is correct, and it's got a little bit of flow to it. I would have liked to see more. I did a +0.5 on that. +1 on that pivot. It was a little slower than your first pivot, but still good. Walks up for a +0.5, a little stronger walk could have gotten us higher than that. Our setup here was good. I gave a 2 for this. And it's easy to reward a good setup when you don't see a lot. Also a good inspection, +1.5 on the inspection. This pivot is correct. You have to help your horse a little bit get through it, but you do an excellent job showing that. You know where your horse's feet are. Steps right off. So I did a +1.5 maneuver score for the pivot, a +1 maneuver score for the trot. Your F and E was a 4. Good exhibitor here. So your overall score was an 85. So that's a pretty good run. Kind of just a nice flow, correct. Little bit of speed, little degree of difficulty there. A really nice second place run. Okay, we come to our first place horse. This is Jennifer. Let's get you to the beginning. Okay. So I started off with a 0 on that trot. Because the stop's a little crooked, I might have been a little skimpy on that. I probably could have gone higher. Your pivot's a +1.5. I like that it had a little speed. It's very correct. Probably our best backup of the class. That was a +1.5 for me. And good flow from pivot to back to pivot, +1.5. All those maneuvers were +1.5. I like the walk. Marches up here with some confidence. A +1, if the horse's head wasn't packed to the side, I could have gone higher. She knows exactly where her horse's feet are, and the horse knows where his feet are. +1.5 on the setup. And I probably didn't even go high enough on that. Watching this for a second time here. Good, confident exhibitor moving around her horse. And we can still see from these angles that this horse is pretty strong. So again, I did a +1.5 on the setup. I probably could have even done a little bit better on that, and a +2 on the inspection. There's a lot of quality here to how she's showing her horse. And I like the horse too. He's pleasant, +1.5 here on the turn, and trotted right off, so +1 on that. So every maneuver except her initial trot, and again, watching this a second time, I was probably stingy on that. I probably should have went higher than a 0. 4 for the F and E, 85.5 here. So I was only a ½ point apart in my first and second place horses. And I think, what was it, a 1.5 apart for my second, or my third and my fourth. So very close. Great class of showmanship. I love to judge it. I thought you guys did a great job, and thank you for showing up and showing your horse.